The blueprint for the modern city is over 5,000 years old. This video is a deep investigation into reconstructing the ancient planning systems used to model early cities. By the end, you will understand the lost operating code for human civilization itself. We will uncover how planners without satellites or computers aligned entire metropolises to the stars, and why their sacred geometry still whispers through our streets today. How do you even begin to decode logic that has been silent for millennia? A single geometric line emerges from the dust beneath an archaeologist's careful brush. It is not a word, not a king's name, but a clean, deliberate mark on a clay tablet. This is our first clue. To reconstruct these lost systems, we must first understand what they truly were. Ancient urban planning was far more than the practical arrangement of streets and houses. It was a complex, often sacred, methodology, a complete operating system for civilization. Think of it not as architecture, but as a kind of philosophy built in stone and clay. These systems integrated precise geometry with the movements of the stars, strict social order with clever environmental adaptation. The city was conceived as a microcosm, a small, ordered model of the universe itself. As urban archaeologist Dr. Monica Smith explains, these were not haphazard settlements. They were, in her words, repeatable templates of order. Their primary function was to impose a durable, human meaning onto the perceived chaos of the natural world. We can break this template down into three core components that appear across continents and millennia. First, a standard unit of measurement, a consistent module like the Indus Valley's precise brick dimensions or the Roman foot that allowed for scalable, reproducible construction. Second, the application of foundational geometric principles, the circle, the square, the grid, as expressions of cosmic harmony. And third, deliberate alignment, orienting main avenues or sacred structures to the solstice sun or a significant star, tying the earthly city to the celestial clockwork. This presents our first and deepest mystery. Were these systems born from pure necessity, a brilliant solution for drainage, defense, and trade? Or were they, at their heart, a spiritual act of world-making, an attempt to build heaven on earth? This foundational enigma is the puzzle we must solve. Before we can reconstruct how they built, we must learn to see what they left behind. That line on the clay tablet points us toward the first and most profound principle of the ancient blueprint, the one that connects earth to sky. Deciphering the archaeo-astronomical alignments, visualize the scene. It is the spring equinox thousands of years ago. As dawn breaks, the first sliver of sunlight crests a specific notch in a distant mountain range. That beam of light travels unerringly down a meticulously planned central avenue, striking the inner sanctum of a temple, illuminating a statue of a deity for just that one day. This precise choreography of stone and sunlight was not a happy accident. It was the ultimate expression of a core belief that human order must be synchronized with cosmic order. From the grand avenues of Egyptian Thebes to the sunken circular plazas of Caral Soup in Peru, the very skeletons of these cities were aligned to solar, lunar, and stellar events. This practice, known as archaeoastronomy, is our most direct window into the ancient planner's mind. But how do we prove it was intentional? Modern researchers have a powerful tool, software that can recreate the night sky from any point on Earth at any date in history. Programs like Stellarium allow us to rewind the celestial clock. We can input the precise coordinates of a pyramid's entrance or a city's main gate, dial back to 2500 BCE, and watch as the virtual sky rotates. The question is simple: does the star Sirius, sacred to the Egyptians, rise directly over that causeway? Does the winter solstice sun set in perfect alignment with this long, ceremonial road? When the answer is yes, again and again, we move from speculation to reconstruction. Anthropologist Anthony Aveney calls this cosmological ordering. The city plan, in his view, becomes a giant calendar, a sacred diagram etched into the landscape. Each alignment served a layered purpose. Solstice markers were crucial for agricultural cycles, telling a community exactly when to plant and when to harvest. Lunar alignments often governed the timing of rituals and ceremonies. The heliacal rising of a specific star, its first appearance just before dawn after a period of invisibility, could signal the coming of the rainy season or the ideal time for a long journey. Reconstructing this principle transforms our understanding of these spaces. A city was not merely a collection of buildings, it was a living, breathing clock face of the heavens. Every sunrise, every starry night, was a confirmation that the community was in its proper place within the universe. This celestial framework, however, needed an earthly geometry to give it form and function on the ground. That celestial clockwork required an earthly language to give it form, a grammar of lines and angles carved directly into the landscape. This brings us to the second principle, the silent mathematics of sacred geometry and proportion. In the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, a planner might have stretched a knotted rope, creating a perfect 3-4-5 triangle to establish a right angle for a city wall. They were applying the principles of the Pythagorean theorem over 2,000 years before Pythagoras was born. This was not advanced calculus, but a profound, embodied understanding of ratios and shapes believed to hold inherent power, a universal design language whispered from Mesopotamia to China. Sacred geometry is the idea that certain forms and mathematical relationships reflect the fundamental order of the cosmos. The most famous of these is the golden ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, a proportion found in the spiral of a nautilus shell and the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. Ancient planners saw this not as coincidence but as a blueprint. They replicated these natural harmonies in their cities, believing it would instill balance and stability into the very fabric of society. Architectural historian Indra Coggies McEwen beautifully describes this practice as frozen music, a harmonic system that created visual and spatial order meant to be felt as much as seen. We find its echoes everywhere. Look at the staggering precision of Teotihuacan Street of the Dead in Mexico, where the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon are positioned according to a complex geometric relationship with the surrounding mountains. Or consider the ancient Indian texts known as the Puranas, which describe city plans as vast mandalas, concentric diagrams of squares and circles representing the universe. These were not whimsical sketches, they were detailed construction manuals. The Hindu Vastu Shastra, for instance, provided exhaustive rules for town planning, dictating everything from the ideal ratio between a city's length and width to the precise placement of temples and gates based on geometric principles. Reconstructing this principle is a painstaking process of measurement and comparison. Archaeologists and surveyors use laser scanners and drones to map ancient foundations with millimeter accuracy, searching for the hidden ratios. When they find that the width of a ceremonial avenue is exactly 1 6/10 times its length, or that a citadel forms a near-perfect square aligned to the cardinal directions, the abstract ideal becomes physically manifest. It reveals a world where mathematics was not separate from spirituality, but its very expression. The city itself was a prayer in stone, a geometric argument for humanity's place within a rational, beautiful universe. But to translate these perfect ratios from the mind's eye into miles of straight streets and level plazas, the ancient engineers needed something more, a set of standardized, foolproof tools. That silent prayer in stone required a common tongue, a shared vocabulary of length and angle that every builder from quarry to rooftop could understand. This brings us to the third and most tangible principle, reverse engineering the standardized unit of measurement. Imagine a simple wooden rod carved with precise notches, discovered in the dusty corner of a Bronze Age workshop. This is not just a tool, it is the literal measure of a kingdom, the physical key that scaled a grand geometric vision down to a human level. Reconstructing how ancient cities were modeled is impossible without cracking their code of measurement, a system often rooted in the human body or the rhythms of the cosmos. The foot, the pace, the cubit from elbow to fingertip, these were universal references. But how do we, millennia later, recover a unit that has left no written definition? Archaeologists become detectives of dimension. They search for a standard module by analyzing the sizes of repeated architectural elements across an entire site. They will measure hundreds of bricks, the spacing between columns, the width of doorways, and the length of wall segments. If a city was built with a consistent plan, these numbers will not be random. They will cluster around multiples of a single, hidden unit. Statistical analysis reveals the common denominator. For example, across the vast Indus Valley civilization, researchers have identified a remarkably consistent unit of length, a Harappan foot of approximately 33.5 centimeters. This standard appears in the dimensions of bricks, which themselves are in a perfect 4:2:1 ratio, and in the width of streets. Finding this module is like hearing the planners speak in numbers. It tells us that a central authority or a deeply ingrained tradition enforced a building code across hundreds of miles. It reveals a level of organization, trade, and communication far beyond what we might assume from ruins alone. As metrology expert John Neal has argued, many of these ancient systems were not isolated, but astonishingly accurate and often interlinked across cultures. The process of reconstruction continues by testing this recovered unit. Does the same cubit length appear in other cities from the same era? Does it neatly divide the dimensions of a ceremonial platform or the circumference of a ritual circle? When the answer is consistently yes, we have recovered a fundamental piece of the operating system. This standardized measure was the practical engine that drove the sacred geometry and executed the celestial alignments. It turned the philosopher king's vision into the mason's daily work. But once you have the ruler, the question becomes far more profound. What were the master templates, the overarching conceptual diagrams that governed how and where to apply these perfect measurements across an entire urban landscape? That shared measurement was the ink, but the myth was the manuscript. Before a single stone was laid, the city existed as a complete idea, a story drawn from the deepest well of human understanding, the creation myth. To reconstruct the planning system, we must finally read this story. In ancient Mesopotamia, the epic poem known as the Enuma Elish tells of the god Marduk defeating the primordial goddess of chaos, Tiamat. From her divided body, he creates the heavens and the earth, establishing a permanent, ordered cosmos. The city, especially Babylon with its great temple to Marduk, was conceived as a direct reflection of that hard-won celestial order, a bulwark against the ever-present threat of chaos returning. The city plan was not merely functional, it was a reenactment of the first act of creation. This conceptual model is what scholars call the master template, a symbolic blueprint that precedes all construction. One of the most powerful of these templates is the idea of the axis mundi, the world axis. This is the central pivot point of the universe, the place where heaven, earth, and the underworld were believed to connect. In physical form, it became the city's sacred heart, a ziggurat in Mesopotamia, a pyramid in Egypt, or a towering temple in Mesoamerica. It was the omphalos, the world navel, from which all power and order emanated. Urban theorist Paul Wheatley described these not just as cities, but as ceremonial centers, where cosmology was literally turned into urban form. So how do you translate a story into a street grid? The myth provides the instructions, a creation story describing 4 world quarters, held up by gods or sacred trees. directly translates into a city plan with 4 main gates aligned to the cardinal directions. The concept of a layered, 3-tiered universe with an underworld, an earthly realm, and a heavenly abode is physically expressed in the stepped platforms of a ziggurat. You climb from one world to the next. Reconstructing these templates requires a fascinating blend of archaeology and comparative mythology. It means reading a 2,000-year-old text about a cosmic battle, then looking at an excavated city plan and seeing the symbolic architecture come to life. In ancient China, the ideal city was modeled on the concept of the squared earth and the circular heaven, leading to the design of walled cities with square layouts and circular ritual altars. In the Maya world, cities were often arranged to mirror sacred geography, with pyramids representing mountains and plazas symbolizing the primordial sea. The city was first a story written in space, a narrative of stability and divine connection. But this leads to a profound and practical tension. What happens when this perfect, sacred blueprint meets the stubborn, uneven reality of a specific river valley or a rocky hillside? That perfect celestial blueprint, however, had to be drawn upon a living, breathing landscape. The fourth principle reveals a profound dialogue, not a dictation, between the sacred template and the stubborn earth. This is the art of geomancy and terrain adaptation, where the mountain itself became a co-architect. At Machu Picchu, Inca engineers did not simply flatten a ridge. They read the granite spine of the Andes as a sacred being, terracing its contours to cradle agriculture, channeling mountain springs through stone fountains that fed both the body and the spirit. Their work was a conversation with the land, a physical manifestation of a belief that the earth held flows of energy or pacha that human settlements must harmonize with to thrive. This practice, known broadly as geomancy, viewed topographic features, water sources, and wind patterns as active participants in the urban plan. A hilltop was not an obstacle, it was a natural acropolis for a temple. A river bend was not a nuisance, it was a protective curve and a source of life. Reconstructing this mindset requires us to see the landscape through ancient eyes. As landscape archaeologist Veronica Strang emphasizes, we must understand the hydrosocial cycle. Water management was never just an engineering problem, it was central to urban spirituality and survival. The flow of a spring, the path of a canal, was woven into the city's ritual and social fabric. We see this principle expressed across the globe. In ancient China, the practice of feng shui guided city planners to position settlements within protective arms of hills with access to flowing water, creating layouts believed to channel beneficial energy and ensure prosperity. The Romans, masters of practical engineering, still revered natural springs, often building their meticulous urban grids around these sacred sites, integrating nymphaea or monumental fountains into their city centers. In the Maya world, cities like Copan were carefully situated within the karst topography, their plazas and pyramids mirroring the arrangement of surrounding hills and caves, which were seen as portals to the underworld. To reconstruct this dialogue, modern researchers employed geographic information systems, or GIS, mapping and hydrological analysis. By overlaying ancient city plans onto detailed topographic models, they can ask new questions. Did the main avenue align with a distant, distinctive peak? Was the reservoir positioned to capture seasonal runoff from a specific watershed? The answers reveal a planning system that was dynamic and responsive. It was not about imposing a rigid geometric grid at all costs, but about finding the most auspicious, most practical marriage between cosmic order and terrestrial reality. The city was not placed on the land, it was grown from it, a collaboration between human vision and the enduring power of place. This adaptive genius leads us to the most concrete evidence of all, the plans that survived not as myth but as lines on stone. A circle within squares carved onto a clay tablet over 3,000 years ago. This is the Nippur map, one of the oldest known city plans in the world. It does not look like a modern map. The city walls form a perfect circle, while the inner temples and canals are arranged in neat, geometric squares. This was not a failure of accuracy, but a different way of seeing. The map is a cartographic puzzle, a symbolic representation of the city as a cosmic diagram, likely showing its divine protection and sacred order. Surviving artifacts like this are incredibly rare, making each one a priceless key to the ancient planner's mind. We have the Babylonian Imago Mundi, a clay tablet depicting the world as a disk surrounded by ocean, with Babylon at its center. We have fragments of the former Urbis Rami, a massive marble plan of Rome that once covered an entire wall, showing every apartment block, staircase, and public fountain in staggering detail. These artifacts are not just maps, they are statements of ideology and control. The former Urbis was a public display of imperial power, a way of saying the entire chaotic, sprawling city could be comprehended and thus governed from a single image. Interpreting them, however, requires a mental shift. As classicist Richard Talbot has noted, the greatest challenge is translating ancient spatial concepts into our modern cartographic understanding. Scale and orientation were often symbolic, not literal. A temple might be drawn vastly larger than a city gate because of its religious importance, not its physical size. A map might face east toward the sacred rising sun rather than north. To reconstruct the planning system, we must become detectives of these fragments, comparing the symbolic map with the brutal reality uncovered by the archaeologist's trowel. The annotations on the Nippur map, written in delicate cuneiform, are a revelation. They label specific areas as property of the Temple of Enlil or as a garden belonging to a high official. This transforms the cosmic diagram into a practical administrative document, linking the sacred geometry directly to the economics of land ownership and the social hierarchy of temple districts. The reconstruction process here is a constant back and forth between artifact and excavation. We look at an artistic depiction on a vase or a relief sculpture showing a walled city, then we search the ground for the foundations that match that portrayal. We piece together shattered marble slabs to understand how a Roman architect visualized water flow and public space. This puzzle solving forces a crucial shift in perspective. It moves us from analyzing the grand, static blueprint to imagining the dynamic, human-scale experience. It makes us ask not just how the city was designed, but how it was lived in. How did a citizen navigate from the geometric perfection of the main processional avenue into the vibrant, crowded irregularity of a residential quarter? This question leads us from the planner's abstract vision directly into the bustling, noisy reality of the ancient street. That vibrant, crowded quarter holds a secret language of stone and space. The width of a street, the height of a wall, the quality of a doorstep, these are not accidents of design. They are the fifth and perhaps most revealing principle, the social and hierarchical blueprint fossilized in the city plan. To reconstruct an ancient planning system, we must learn to read this silent map of power, privilege, and daily life. A grand ceremonial avenue, paved with fitted stone and lined with statues, tells one story. A narrow, unpaved alleyway that twists behind it, just wide enough for a single person to pass, tells another. The city was a physical machine for organizing society itself. Sociologist Gideon S. Joberg's model of the pre-industrial city helps us see this pattern. He observed that across many early urban centers, a clear spatial order reflected the social order. At the geographic and symbolic heart lay the sacred precinct, the temple, ziggurat, or palace temple complex. Radiating outward were the administrative and elite residential districts. Further still were the crowded quarters of artisans, merchants, and laborers, often separated by craft or ethnicity. Finally, on the margins, were the areas for activities considered polluting or essential, like pottery kilns, tanneries, or burial grounds. This was zoning millennia before the term existed. Reconstructing this social blueprint requires detective work beyond the monuments. Archaeologists perform what's called spatial analysis, mapping the distribution of everyday artifacts. Where do you find fine imported pottery, jewelry, and evidence of elaborate dining? Where do you find only simple, locally made tools and utensils? The answers draw a clear map of wealth and status across the city grid. Access patterns are equally telling. In the meticulously planned Harappan cities, the wide main streets connected the citadel, where the ruling class likely lived, to the gates and the lower town. But the access into the citadel itself was controlled and limited. In Roman towns, the multi-story apartment blocks called insulae were often segregated by economic class, with more desirable ground-floor shops and apartments distinct from the cramped, precarious upper floors where the poor lived. And on Minoan Crete, the vast, labyrinthine palace at Knossos was not just a royal home. It was the absolute economic and ritual core. Storage magazines for grain, oil, and treasure were built directly into its foundations, indicating that control of resources and their redistribution was centralized within the palace walls. This social ordering was not merely about separation, it was about control and spectacle. The processional route in cities from Babylon to Tenochtitlan was designed for ritual parades that reinforced the ruler's divine connection, a moving theater of power witnessed by the masses from their designated spaces. Reconstructing this principle transforms ruins into a lived experience. We begin to see not just buildings but boundaries, not just spaces, but who was allowed to occupy them and under what conditions. This encoded hierarchy, however, was not an end in itself. It was the framework for a city's most vital function, the economic engine that required its own brilliant and invisible infrastructure to keep everything running. The silent map of social order was made possible by something even more fundamental, a hidden lattice of water and stone. Every great early city ran on a secret code, the infrastructure of hydraulic and transport networks. Visualize the vast, hidden labyrinth beneath the streets of Mohenjo-Daro. Thousands of precisely laid baked brick drains, connecting to private bathrooms and public wells, formed one of history's first integrated urban sanitation systems. This was not a luxury, it was the essential engineering that made dense, permanent settlement possible. To reconstruct these ancient cities, we must learn to read this buried code, the channels and roads that were the true lifeblood of civilization. The reconstruction of hydraulic systems is a detective story written in mud and stone. Modern archaeologists use tools like ground-penetrating radar to see beneath the surface, mapping the ghostly outlines of ancient pipes and canals without lifting a shovel. Sediment analysis can tell a vivid story, identifying layers of clean waterborne silt in a reservoir, or the sudden deposit of debris that signals a canal's collapse. This technical work reveals a staggering level of foresight. Consider the Nabateans at Petra, masters of surviving in a desert. Engineer Charles Ortloff's research highlights their advanced hydrological engineering. They constructed a complex network of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipelines that captured every precious drop of seasonal floodwater, channeling it through the rock-cut city to sustain a population of thousands. Their planning was not just about survival, but about creating an oasis of political and economic power in an otherwise inhospitable landscape. Water's role was always dual, both profoundly practical and deeply symbolic. In the ceremonial centers of the Maya, vast reservoirs called aguadas were constructed with plaster-lined basins to store water for the dry season. But these were not merely tanks, they were sacred pools, often positioned in relation to temples and palaces, reflecting the belief that water was a divine gift from the rain gods and the underworld. The management of water was a direct manifestation of a ruler's power to mediate between the people and the cosmos. Similarly, the famed Qanat systems of Persia were feats of social organization as much as engineering. These were underground tunnels, sometimes miles long, that tapped into mountain aquifers and used gravity to deliver a steady, reliable flow to arid fields and cities. Building and maintaining a qanat required a shared community effort and a sophisticated understanding of geology and slope, a collective intelligence etched into the earth itself. On land, the flow was managed by another kind of network, the road. The Romans elevated road building into a precise science and a tool of empire. Their famous roads began with the groma, a simple but effective surveying tool consisting of a vertical staff with cross arms and plumb lines. With it, surveyors could lay out perfectly straight lines across vast distances, dictating the relentless, orderly march of the empire. These roads were engineered in layers with a foundation of packed rubble, a middle course of smaller stones set in mortar, and a top surface of fitted paving stones cambered to shed rainwater into drainage ditches. They were built to last, and many still form the base of modern highways today. Reconstructing these networks forces a crucial shift in perspective. It shows us that ancient urban planning was as much about dynamic management, the flow of water, goods, information, and people, as it was about creating static, beautiful monuments. This engineering prowess immediately raises a profound question: who held the knowledge and, more importantly, the authority to coordinate such complex, large-scale projects that served the entire community? The answer lies not in a single blueprint, but in the emergence of a new kind of societal mind. The measuring cord was a scepter of power. Who, in those ancient societies, held the authority to stretch that cord across a virgin landscape and declare, "Here the city begins"? The identity of the planner is the final, crucial piece of the reconstruction puzzle. We are not looking for a single architect's name, but for the social and political structure that could turn a cosmological vision into a coordinated, city-wide reality. The evidence is indirect, a shadow cast by the stones themselves. In ancient Egypt, artifacts like the Nama palette may hold a clue. This ceremonial slate, dating to the dawn of dynastic Egypt, shows the king wearing the crown of unified lands about to strike a foe. More importantly, he is shown in a ritual act of founding, perhaps even measuring out a sacred enclosure. It is a powerful iconographic statement, linking the king's divine authority directly to the act of creating ordered space. The pharaoh was not just a ruler, he was the supreme planner, the earthly guarantor of Maat, the cosmic order that the city's perfect geometry was meant to reflect. This suggests a top-down model where planning was an exercise of state power. Political anthropologist James C. Scott offers a compelling lens for this. He argues that early states sought to make their societies legible, to simplify complex, organic communities into standardized, measurable, and taxable units. An orderly grid of streets, uniform house plots, and centralized temples made the population easier to count, control, and extract resources from. The city plan, in this view, becomes a tool of administrative control as much as a sacred diagram. The astonishing standardization of the Indus Valley civilization supports this idea. Across hundreds of miles from Mohenjo-Daro to Harappa, bricks were produced in identical ratios. Streets maintained consistent widths. This level of uniformity implies a strong central authority, or at the very least, a deeply ingrained and widely shared technical tradition that functioned like a state mandate. It speaks to a society capable of monumental coordination. Yet, was it solely about control, or could these systems also have embodied a communal vision? The construction of a city required the mobilization of thousands, from quarry workers and bricklayers to surveyors and artisans. This labor was likely organized through systems of obligation, tribute, or shared civic duty. The resulting urban form, therefore, was a collective project. Its harmonious geometry might have been accepted, even cherished, not just as an imposition from above, but as a shared source of identity and cosmic security. The planner, then, might have been a hybrid figure, a priest-king advised by a guild of astronomer-surveyors, individuals who held esoteric knowledge of the stars and the sacred mathematics. Their authority derived from their ability to mediate between the community and the divine, to ensure the city's alignment with the forces that guaranteed prosperity and order. This helps explain the remarkable longevity of certain urban forms. A city was not built in a day and then frozen. It was a living palimpsest, a manuscript written over many generations. A street might retain its sacred alignment for 1,000 years, even as the buildings lining it were rebuilt again and again. The original planner's template proved so resilient, so deeply embedded in the culture's understanding of how a city should be, that it guided growth for centuries. To reconstruct the planner is to understand this delicate balance between coercive power and collective belief. It forces us to ask, were these grand urban orders a cage designed to manage humanity, or a communal home built to harmonize with the universe? The silent streets, in their enduring geometry, hold the answer to both. The wall in Rome holds a secret. Beneath its smooth, uniform surface, a laser scan reveals the faint, stubborn outline of an older wall, set at a slightly different angle. This is the true nature of the ancient city, not a single, perfect blueprint, but a living document written, erased, and rewritten over centuries. Archaeologists call this a palimpsest, a manuscript where old writing lingers beneath the new. To reconstruct an ancient planning system, we must learn to read not just one plan, but the entire sequence of plans, the story of a city's long conversation with itself. This is a profound methodological shift. We move from analyzing a static snapshot to reconstructing a dynamic film, frame by painstaking frame. The primary tool for this is stratigraphy, the science of reading soil layers. Think of it as urban archaeology's most fundamental law. The deeper you dig, the further back in time you go. Each layer of construction debris, ash from a fire, or clean silt from a flood represents a chapter in the city's life. By meticulously recording the sequence of these layers, archaeologists can build a relative chronology. They can determine that the grid of streets was laid after the Great Fire, or that the temple was expanded before the new city wall was built. This layer cake of history is then brought into stunning clarity with modern technology. Techniques like photogrammetry, which uses hundreds of overlapping photographs to create a precise three-dimensional model, and laser scanning allow us to digitally peel back these urban layers. We can virtually remove the medieval church to examine the Roman Forum beneath it, or strip away plaster to see the original brickwork of a Minoan palace. This digital dissection reveals the adaptive genius of ancient planning. No case illustrates this better than the legendary mound of Hierarchical, known as Troy. Here, not one city, but 9 distinct settlements were built, one atop the ruins of another over thousands of years. Each layer, from the early Bronze Age fortress to the grand Hellenistic city, represents a different society with its own rulers, technologies, and vision. Reconstructing Troy means disentangling 9 separate planning systems. One city might have been a dense warren of houses clustered for defense. The next, built after a conquest, might impose a broad, ceremonial avenue in a new architectural style. The plans were not static. They evolved in response to disaster, to new ideas, and to new power. This palimpsest principle shows us that ancient urban systems were remarkably flexible. They were not brittle commandments etched in stone, but resilient frameworks that could be adapted, expanded, and reinterpreted. A sacred axis might remain respected for a millennium, even as the buildings lining it changed from mud brick to marble. This inherent adaptability becomes most poignant and most revealing when we examine the rare cities where the story stopped mid-sentence. A ghost city is the ultimate time capsule, its original blueprint preserved in stone, untouched by later generations. The ancient Egyptian capital of Akhenaten, now known as Tel El Amarna, stands as perhaps the most striking example. Pharaoh Akhenaten, in his revolutionary turn to the worship of a single solar deity, ordered this entire city built from scratch in the desert. Within a few short years, a sprawling metropolis of temples, palaces, and suburbs rose along a rigid, linear plan stretching for miles beside the Nile. Then, within a generation of his passing, it was utterly abandoned. This rapid birth and death offers archaeologists a pristine snapshot, a planning system frozen in its first and only iteration. Without centuries of organic growth and modification, we can see the original royal intent with startling clarity. The city's layout was a perfect expression of Akhenaten's new order, a long, processional royal road connecting major temples dedicated to the Aten, the sun disk. The residential suburbs for workers and officials were laid out in neat, repetitive grids. This reveals the immense power of a royal decree to manifest a complete urban vision at breathtaking speed. Yet, its abandonment just as swiftly hints at a profound vulnerability. The plan was a top-down imposition, a radical break from the traditional Egyptian cosmology that had anchored cities like Thebes for 1,000 years. When the theological and political foundation vanished with the pharaoh, the entire reason for the city's existence vanished with it. It was a brilliant plan, but one that failed to become a home, showing us that even the most geometrically perfect system requires a deeper cultural buy-in to endure. This concept of a system pushed to its breaking point finds a haunting parallel in the mysterious decline of the Indus Valley cities. For centuries, their advanced, standardized planning and hydraulic engineering fostered stability. But evidence suggests a gradual shift in climate patterns, perhaps a weakening of the monsoon rains or the drying up of river channels. Here, the very sophistication of their planning may have become a liability. As theorist Joseph Tainter suggests, complex systems require increasing energy to maintain. When the environmental foundation shifted, the immense effort needed to keep the precise water channels clear and the agricultural surplus flowing may have become unsustainable. The cities did not necessarily collapse in a single catastrophe, but their populations may have slowly dispersed, adapting to a new, less centralized way of life. The grid and the drains remained, a monument to a system that could not adapt quickly enough. Reconstructing these unfinished or abandoned cities acts as a crucial control group for our investigation. They strip away the noise of later success, showing us the raw blueprint and its potential flaws. They highlight the delicate balance every planning system had to maintain between visionary order and environmental reality, between centralized authority and communal resilience. In their silent streets, we see not failure, but a critical experiment in the long story of how humanity builds its world, pushing us to wonder how many other cultures, working in complete isolation, arrived at eerily similar solutions to the universal puzzle of urban life. Across the globe, pyramids rose toward the same sun. This is the central puzzle of parallel evolution, the uncanny repetition of urban forms in worlds that never met. How do we explain the fact that the Maya, building in the dense jungles of Central America, and the Egyptians, working along the Nile's fertile banks, both conceived of the city as a pyramidal core surrounded by astronomically aligned avenues? To reconstruct the ancient mind, we must now widen our lens to a planetary scale, comparing systems that emerged in total isolation. This comparative analysis forces a critical distinction. Were these similarities the result of a universal human response to common challenges, or evidence of a lost, interconnected world where ideas somehow diffused across impossible distances? The latter is a seductive, often controversial notion. The former, however, reveals something even more profound about the nature of human collective learning. Historian David Christian frames this as a process where human groups, facing analogous pressures, slowly accumulate and share practical knowledge. Over generations, this knowledge crystallizes into cultural forms. When separate groups confront the same fundamental puzzles, how to manage agricultural surplus, organize large-scale labor, express divine and political power in a lasting way, they can arrive at startlingly similar architectural answers. We see this convergence clearly in three foundational principles that span continents. First, the sacred center. In Mesopotamia, it was the ziggurat, an artificial mountain linking heaven and earth. In China, it was the raised palace temple complex within the walled city, representing the axis of the world. In Mesoamerica, it was the stone pyramid, a literal mountain of power. Each served as the symbolic and gravitational heart of the urban plan, a fixed point of order. Second, the alignment to cosmic order. The strict north-south orientation of Chinese imperial cities, mirroring the cosmos, finds its echo in the solstice-aligned causeways of Teotihuacan and the pyramid temples of Giza calibrated to star cycles. This was not merely observational astronomy. It was a declaration that the city itself was a mechanism for maintaining cosmic harmony. Third, the mastery of water. The intricate canal networks of the Indus Valley, the aqueducts of Rome, and the reservoir systems of Anka all represent a societal commitment to controlling hydraulic flow for survival, economic growth, and ritual purity. The solutions are technologically distinct, but the underlying imperative is identical. This global pattern suggests that urban planning is less about invention and more about discovery. It is as if these ancient societies were independently uncovering a deep grammar of settled life, a set of logical and symbolic relationships between community, authority, and environment. The physical city became the most durable medium for encoding this hard-won knowledge. What modern technology now allows us to do is visualize this planetary conversation in a way our predecessors never could. We can overlay the geometric footprint of Mohenjo-Daro with that of Caral Soup in Peru, searching for shared ratios. We can use satellite data to compare the hydrological adaptations of Khmer cities with those of the ancient Nabateans. This digital comparative reconstruction reveals the silhouette of a shared human ingenuity. It shows us that the drive to create meaningful, ordered space is a universal thread in the human story, woven independently into countless cultural tapestries. And it begs the final, practical question: if we can now see these patterns from a God's eye view, can we use that understanding to step into the ancient planners' shoes and attempt the ultimate reconstruction, not just of their city, but of their lived experience within it? A laser pulse fired from an aircraft pierces a dense jungle canopy and returns a whisper of data. This is LiDAR, light detection and ranging, and it is revolutionizing our ability to see the lost cities hidden beneath forests and fields. We have moved from the palimpsest of soil to the palimpsest of photons, entering a new era of reconstruction where ancient planning systems are not just studied, but digitally resurrected. This is the frontier where archaeology meets computer science, a collaboration that transforms two-dimensional lines on a clay tablet into an immersive, three-dimensional world you can step inside. The tools are as varied as they are powerful. LiDAR surveys from the air map millions of points on the landscape, creating a bare earth digital model that strips away vegetation to reveal the subtle contours of ancient roads, plazas, and terraces invisible from the ground. Meanwhile, on site, the technique of photogrammetry uses hundreds of overlapping photographs of a ruin, stitching them together with sophisticated algorithms to build a precise, measurable 3D model of every surviving stone. These are not just fancy visuals for documentaries, though they are stunning. They are rigorous analytical instruments, digital archaeologist Matthew L. Vincent emphasizes that these reconstructions are built to test hypotheses. A virtual model of a temple complex allows researchers to conduct experiments that would be impossible in the physical world. They can calculate sightlines from a priest's chamber to the main altar, tracing the visual control of ritual space. They can simulate crowd movement through a city's gates during a festival, analyzing bottlenecks and flows. They can even model acoustics, testing how a chant might have echoed through a stone courtyard to understand the sensory impact of ceremony. One of the most profound applications is testing those celestial alignments we discussed earlier. With a precise 3D model of a city and astronomical software, researchers can recreate the sun's path on a specific ancient date, like a solstice. They can project that virtual sunlight down the main avenue in real time. Does it illuminate the temple doorway at exactly noon? Does the shadow of an obelisk touch a specific marker? The digital simulation provides a yes or no answer, turning a theoretical alignment into a verifiable architectural fact. Projects like the Digital Karnak project allow anyone to explore the sprawling evolution of that Egyptian temple complex over 2,000 years, layer by layer. Virtual reality reconstructions of ancient Rome let you stand in the Forum and look up at buildings that have been dust for centuries. This experiential shift is monumental. We are no longer just looking at a plan, we are inhabiting it. We can sense the scale of a processional way, feel the enclosure of a narrow street, and grasp the intentional drama of a staged approach to a palace. This digital resurrection makes the planner's spatial intent visceral. Yet, for all its technological brilliance, this virtual world is built upon a mountain of humble, material clues. Every polygon in the model, every textured surface, is informed by the painstaking work of excavation, the analysis of a pottery shard, the understanding of local geology. The computer scientist can build the city, but only the archaeologist can tell them what it meant. The virtual walkway is paved with real data, a reminder that the most advanced reconstruction still begins with a single line in the dust. That broken clay token, forgotten in a corner, holds the city's blueprint in miniature. The grandest designs of the ancient world were often executed and recorded through the smallest of objects. To reconstruct the planning system, we must sometimes look down, not up, at the humble artifacts that were the tools of the trade and the debris of daily life. A surveyor's bronze plumb bob discovered near the foundations of a Roman wall is not just a tool, it is proof of the meticulous standard of verticality demanded by the plan. A set of finely carved stone weights, all multiples of a single unit, found in an Indus Valley marketplace, speaks to a regulated economy that required and enforced uniformity across the city. These objects are the physical fingerprints of the administrative mind. Among the most revealing are the Mesopotamian boundary stones, known as kuduras. These were not simple markers, they were often elaborate stone monuments, sometimes carved with images of gods and symbols, and inscribed with cuneiform text. Their purpose was formidable, to permanently define the property lines of a temple, a palace, or a wealthy individual, but the inscriptions went far beyond mere measurement. They detailed the exact dimensions of the plot and, crucially, included vivid curses against anyone who would dare to move or dishonor the stone. This fusion of the legal, the geometric, and the divine is a perfect microcosm of the planning system itself, order protected by cosmic law. The stone says this space is defined, it is owned, and its integrity is guaranteed by the gods. Moving from administration to aesthetics, even art becomes a data point. A fragment of a painted fresco from a Minoan villa, showing a schematic town with multi-story buildings, gives us a window into how the people of that time visualized their own urban environment. It is a conceptual map reflecting which elements they considered most important to represent. Material culture studies take this further, mapping the city through its everyday debris. Imagine an archaeologist carefully plotting the find spots of thousands of pottery sherds across an excavation. They begin to notice a pattern. A specific, fine style of painted pottery appears almost exclusively in one district near the Acropolis, while a plainer, utilitarian ware dominates a neighborhood by the city walls. This is not random. It allows researchers to reconstruct economic and social zones with remarkable clarity, drawing a map of wealth and status directly from the broken dishes of its inhabitants. Even a child's toy can be a clue. A small terracotta cart with wooden wheels found in the gutter of a street in Pompeii is a charming object, but to a researcher, it asks a practical question: what was this street like? For a child to play with a wheeled cart here, the surface had to be relatively smooth and the street wide enough for such play. It implies a certain quality of life and a specific urban texture, a space that accommodated not just commerce and procession, but childhood itself. Each of these artifacts, from the cursed stone to the simple toy, is a tangible piece of the planning puzzle. They ground our grand theories of celestial alignment and sacred geometry in the gritty, lived reality of the ancient city. They remind us that the ultimate purpose of any plan was to shape a life, from the king performing a ritual on the sacred axis to the merchant measuring grain in the market, to the child rolling a cart down a sun-drenched street. This human-scale reality, however, forces us to confront the most complex layer of all, the intangible beliefs and stories that gave meaning to every measured line and every oriented wall. The rope and peg in the king's hands are not just tools, they are a declaration. Across the ancient world, the most explicit explanations of urban ideals were not hidden in secret blueprints, but proudly displayed for all to see, carved into stone walls and inscribed on monuments. To reconstruct the planning system, we must become literate in this public language of power and purpose, the iconography and inscriptions that tell us exactly what the builders thought they were doing. In the vast Assyrian palaces of Nimrud and Nineveh, towering alabaster reliefs depict a recurring, powerful scene. The king, often shown under the protective gaze of winged deities, holds a coiled measuring rope and a stake. He is shown in the act of stretching that cord across the empty earth, performing the sacred rite of city founding. This was potent propaganda, a visual statement that urban order was a direct gift from the gods delivered through the monarch's hand. It transforms the practical act of surveying into a divine mandate, cementing the ruler's role as the sole source of civilization's geometry. Half a world away, a similar narrative is recorded in a different script. On the stone stelae of the Maya, intricate hieroglyphic texts commemorate the founding of ceremonial centers. A key verb in these inscriptions, as deciphered by epigraphers like David Stewart, translates to he seats or it is seated. The text might read, on the day 9 Ik, the wits, the mountain place was seated. This was not a casual event. It marked the ritual establishment of a city's sacred heart, its pyramid, on a day carefully chosen by calendar priests for its cosmic significance. These inscriptions do more than record dates, they give us the ancient names for places. A district might be called Place of the Reeds or Hill of the Water Lily, names that evoke the landscape's memory and tell us how the people perceived their own urban environment. A structure labeled the sleeping place might be a palace, while the dark interior could refer to a temple sanctuary. This philological work, the careful translation and contextual study of ancient texts, breathes life into the silent stones. We find these descriptive texts across cultures. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a Greek navigational guide from the 1st century, describes the bustling ports of the Indian Ocean not just as dots on a map, but as functional urban entities. It notes which harbors have fresh water, which are ruled by friendly kings, and where the best markets for ivory or incense are found. This is a planner's and a merchant's view of the city, reconstructed from a traveler's practical observations. Going back even further, the ancient Indian Rigveda contains detailed descriptions of the ideal Aryan settlement. It speaks of a village laid out in a circular or rectangular form, with a clear central space for communal gathering and rituals, surrounded by dwellings and protected by a trench or palisade. This textual model provides a literary blueprint, a vision of social and spatial order that likely influenced early urban forms in the region. Reconstructing planning from these sources is a delicate act of translation, both linguistic and cultural. We must read the boastful inscription on a Roman aqueduct not just as a list of emperors and costs, but as a claim about the state's power to reshape nature for urban comfort. We must see the repetitive geometric patterns on a Minoan fresco not merely as decoration, but as a symbolic representation of architectural order and perhaps even sacred geometry. The city, in this light, was a layered text to be read by its inhabitants every day. Its grand avenues were like chapter headings, its temples like illuminated paragraphs, and its neighborhoods like detailed footnotes, all conveying a story about power, cosmology, and community identity. This ancient narrative, etched in stone and word, is not a relic. Modern urban planners and architects seeking sustainable and meaningful design are now looking back to these integrative models, searching for inspiration in cities that were once understood not just as collections of buildings, but as stories built for the ages. The sacred geometry of a Persian Qanat flows silently beneath a modern university campus in arid Iran, providing passive cooling and irrigation. This is not a museum piece, it is a living system, and it reveals a startling truth. The most advanced ideas in contemporary sustainable urbanism are not inventions, but rediscoveries, direct echoes of those ancient operating systems we have been reconstructing. The past is not a sealed archive, it is an open-source library for building a resilient future. Today's visionary planners, often without realizing it, are speaking the same language as those ancient astronomer surveyors, a language of harmony between human habitat and natural law. Consider the passive solar design championed in modern eco-cities. Architects meticulously angle buildings and position windows to maximize winter sunlight and minimize summer heat, drastically reducing energy needs. This is not a new idea. It is the direct descendant of the solstice alignments at Teotihuacan or the solar-oriented temples of Egypt, a technological application of the same principle, synchronizing the built environment with the cosmic clock for practical benefit. The ancient agora of Athens or the Forum of Rome were never just markets, they were vibrant mixed-use hubs combining commerce, politics, social gathering, and ritual. This integrated model is precisely what modern urbanists like Jan Gehl advocate for when they speak of cities for people. Gehl's work emphasizes human scale, walkability, and lively public spaces that encourage interaction, principles that were inherent in the organic, if sometimes chaotic, growth of medieval towns that grew upon ancient street grids. These were places designed for the pace of a pedestrian, not the speed of a chariot or a car. We see the ancient principle of biophilia, the innate human need to connect with nature, re-emerging with profound urgency. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were a legendary wonder, but the integration of nature was commonplace, from the sacred groves in Greek sanctuaries to the courtyard gardens of Pompeii. Today, green roofs, urban forests, and linear parks along restored waterways are not just amenities, they are essential infrastructure for climate resilience, mental well-being, and biodiversity, mirroring that ancient understanding of the city as part of a living ecosystem, not separate from it. This leads to powerful, reflective questions. Can the sacred geometry that once fostered deep community identity and a sense of cosmic belonging inform our sterile modern place-making? Could the symbolic power of a central public space, once a temple precinct, be harnessed to create new civic hearts that offer meaning beyond consumption? And critically, can ancient hydrological wisdom provide real-world solutions? The Qanat system, a 2,500-year-old technology, is being studied by engineers in dry regions from Oman to New Mexico for its ability to transport water without evaporation, using only gravity. The intricate rainwater harvesting and reservoir management of the Khmer at Angkor offer lessons in managing seasonal deluges and droughts. This reconstruction is intensely applied. It shows that the past holds a sophisticated toolkit for our most pressing challenges, a toolkit built on observation, adaptation, and a long-term perspective that modern planning often lacks. Yet this endeavor carries a profound ethical weight. As we mine the past for solutions, we must do so with deep respect, recognizing these systems as cultural treasures, not merely technical schematics. The reconstruction is complete only when we honor the wisdom embedded within these stones, learning not just how they built, but why, and carrying that integrated vision forward into the cities of tomorrow. A three-dimensional model of a lost city glows on a screen, a perfect digital resurrection. But whose city is it, and whose story does this polished reconstruction actually tell? This is the crucial, often overlooked frontier of our entire endeavor, the ethics of reconstruction. Piecing together ancient planning systems is far more than a technical puzzle. It carries the profound responsibility of representing another culture's intellectual and spiritual heritage, often for a global audience that may have no other reference point. We must confront difficult questions. Who truly owns the past, and how do we ensure our modern tools and perspectives do not silently impose our own biases, or worse, contemporary political agendas onto these silent stones? Consider a common pitfall in both physical and digital reconstruction, the monumental bias. It is far easier, and often more visually spectacular, to rebuild a towering temple or a pharaoh's palace than to reconstruct the crowded, organic neighborhoods where the vast majority of people lived their lives. A reconstruction that focuses solely on elite architecture presents a skewed vision of the past, one of unchallenged power and pristine order, erasing the vibrant, messy reality of the ancient city. It risks turning history into a pageant of kings, told from the palace walls looking down rather than from the streets looking up. Similarly, a digital model that presents a single, definitive version of a site can be misleading. It can freeze a complex, evolving urban story into one moment, presenting a contested interpretation as settled fact. Was this building painted bright red or left as bare stone? Was this plaza always empty, or was it filled with market stalls on certain days? Presenting one answer without showing the evidence or the debate turns interpretation into authority. This is where the voice of living descendant communities becomes not just important but essential. As indigenous archaeologist and scholar Dorothy Lippert has powerfully noted, the past is not a disconnected artifact, it is a relative. For many cultures around the world, from Aboriginal Australians to Native American nations, the ancient city is not a ruin. It is an ancestor, a place that holds ongoing cultural, spiritual, and legal significance. A reconstruction made without their consultation or against their wishes can be a form of ongoing cultural displacement. Ethical practice demands collaboration, sharing not just results, but the process of inquiry and interpretation. It means asking, what stories do you tell about this place? What should the world understand about how your ancestors lived here? The ethical foundation crumbles long before the digital model is built if the physical evidence is looted or destroyed. The illicit antiquities trade, driven by demand for museum pieces and private collections, is an archaeological catastrophe. A looted artifact ripped from its context is a sentence torn from a book. We may recover the beautiful object, the word, but we lose the entire paragraph, the chapter, the story of who used it, where it was kept, and what it meant in daily life. This destruction obliterates the very data needed for any responsible reconstruction, turning a potential window into the past into a decorative but silent trophy. This is why the growing field of public archaeology is so vital. It seeks to share the process of discovery responsibly, inviting the public to see the careful work, the layers of dirt, the broken pottery, and the slow, collaborative interpretation. It demystifies the science and highlights its inherent uncertainties. This transparency is our best defense against what some scholars wryly call pyramidiosy, the fringe theories and sensationalist claims that ignore evidence in favor of dramatic, often nationalistic or extraterrestrial narratives. These distortions prey on the genuine wonder we feel for the ancient world, replacing nuanced understanding with simplistic myth. Ultimately, ethical reconstruction requires a posture of humility. It means showing our work, our debates, and our changing minds. It means presenting the ancient city not as a solved mystery, but as an ongoing conversation between the past and the present, one that respects the people who built it, the communities connected to it, and the fragile evidence they left behind. The most honest reconstruction might sometimes be a model with multiple versions, or a visualization that fades from certainty into transparency, reminding us that every line we draw is an informed guess, a respectful attempt to listen to a whisper from the dust. The line between a revolutionary discovery and a compelling fiction is often surprisingly thin. Every field of deep inquiry, from astrophysics to ancient history, has its shadowlands, zones of intense debate and controversial interpretation. Reconstructing the planning systems of early cities is no exception. Here, we must navigate a spectrum of ideas, from the plausible but hotly contested to the widely dismissed fringe, not to sensationalize, but to understand how genuine scholarship builds its case. This journey through the debated models is essential, for it sharpens the very tools we use to separate evidence from echo, and reminds us that all our reconstructions are provisional, waiting for the next clue. Consider the enduring debate surrounding the Giza Plateau. Mainstream Egyptology presents the three Great Pyramids as monumental tombs, built sequentially over generations. Yet, a persistent alternative theory proposes they were conceived as a single, grand geometric plan, their positions mirroring the stars of Orion's belt with uncanny precision on the ground. Proponents point to the alignment, arguing it is too perfect to be coincidence, suggesting a master blueprint thousands of years ahead of its time. Archaeologists, while acknowledging the celestial correlation, counter with stratigraphy and radiocarbon dates that show clear phases of construction. They ask, if it was one plan, why are the pyramids not perfectly aligned to the same cardinal orientation? Why does the internal construction style vary? The debate hinges on the weight given to a single, striking piece of evidence, the star correlation, against a mountain of contextual archaeological data. It is a case study in how different lenses can look upon the same stones and see entirely different narratives. Then there are the interpretations that fall firmly outside academic consensus, like the notion of ancient alien architects or a single, global super-civilization erased from history. These ideas, often grouped under the term pseudo-archaeology, are compelling narratives that fill gaps in the record with extraordinary answers. They ask tantalizing questions. How could ancient people move such massive stones? How do we explain technological leaps? But as archaeologist Jeb J. Card explains, the problem is not with asking questions, but with the method of answering them. In a constructive engagement, Card suggests we must first understand why these theories resonate. They often provide simple, sweeping answers to complex, fragmented histories, and they can feel personally empowering, suggesting a hidden truth overlooked by institutions. The scientific method, by contrast, embraces complexity, uncertainty, and slow, cumulative evidence. It requires that a theory not only explain one mysterious artifact, but all the mundane ones surrounding it, the pottery shards, the tool marks, the food remains. A theory about alien builders must also explain why those aliens used local quarrying techniques and left behind ordinary hearths and middens. This critical lens is crucial when examining sites like the Nazca lines in Peru. These vast geoglyphs etched into the desert pavement are undeniably part of a planned ceremonial landscape. The controversy lies in the scale and purpose of that plan. Are the lines primarily ritual pathways connected to water and fertility rituals, as most archaeologists conclude based on their endpoints at hills and water sources? Or do they form a massive astronomical calendar with each line pointing to a celestial event? The evidence here is beautifully ambiguous, inviting both rigorous study and speculative leaps. Similarly, the magnificent earthworks of the Ohio Hopewell culture, great geometric enclosures of earth and stone, show clear astronomical alignments to moonrises and sunsets. The debate is not over if they are aligned, but over the precision and intent. Were they accurate observatories for tracking complex lunar cycles, or more generalized ceremonial spaces oriented toward the heavens? Each new survey with laser scanning technology brings more data to this ancient conversation. Engaging with these controversies from the debated to the fringe performs a vital service. It forces us to articulate what constitutes valid evidence. Is it a geometric pattern perceived from a satellite view, or the layered context of an excavated post hole? It reminds us that our reconstructions are models, not final truths. They are the best stories we can tell with the pieces we have, and they must remain open to revision or even wholesale rewriting when a new line is found in the dust. This humility before the evidence is not a weakness of the scientific process, but its greatest strength, ensuring that our quest to understand the past remains a living, evolving dialogue. A single algorithm can now sift through the ghostly imprints of 10,000 cities. This is the new frontier, where artificial intelligence and vast digital archives are not just tools for reconstruction, but active partners in discovery, capable of seeing patterns no human eye could ever perceive. We are moving beyond mapping what we have found and beginning to predict what we have yet to find. Machine learning algorithms trained on immense datasets of known archaeological sites, satellite imagery, and environmental data are starting to act like digital diviners. They analyze the landscape with a cold, relentless logic, scanning satellite photos for the faintest spectral signatures of human activity. A subtle depression in a field, a slight variation in soil moisture, or a specific pattern of vegetation growth can signal the presence of a buried road, a collapsed wall, or the footprint of a long-vanished building. These are not the grand pyramids, but the connective tissue of civilization, the forgotten paths and outlying farms that complete the urban picture. This predictive power is transforming surveys. Where an archaeologist might physically walk a grid over a promising valley, an AI can first process terabytes of satellite data for an entire region, flagging the 100 most probable sites for human settlement based on factors like proximity to water, defensibility, and lines of sight. It does not replace the archaeologist's trowel, but it directs it with unprecedented precision, turning a search for a needle in a haystack into a targeted examination of the most likely straw. This leads to a profound shift in scale. We are no longer limited to reconstructing one city at a time. We can begin to model entire cultural landscapes, understanding how cities functioned as nodes in a wider network of trade, communication, and resource flow. But the true revolution goes deeper than finding lost walls. It lies in simulating the life that pulsed within them. Computational archaeologist Isa Romanowska champions the use of agent-based modeling for this very purpose. Imagine creating a digital simulation of an ancient city, not as a static model, but as a dynamic playground populated by thousands of autonomous digital agents. Each agent represents a simplified citizen programmed with basic rules: find food, go to work, attend a ceremony, interact with neighbors. You set the parameters, the city's layout, its resource locations, its social rules, and then you set the simulation in motion. You do not dictate the outcome, you observe it emerge from the bottom up. What happens over a simulated century? Do crowded markets naturally form at certain crossroads? Does social stratification increase if you model a centralized grain storage system? How does the city's layout hold up under a simulated drought or a sudden influx of new residents? This kind of modeling allows us to stress test our theories about ancient urban life in ways that physical evidence alone never could. It moves us from reconstructing the stage set to simulating the play itself, with all its unpredictable actors and emergent dramas. This represents the ultimate synthesis of all the principles we have explored: the celestial alignment, the sacred geometry, the social zoning, the hydraulic network. They are no longer isolated facets. In a sophisticated simulation, they become interacting variables in a complex system. You can ask the model, did this solstice alignment actually improve community cohesion by focusing ritual activity? Did that standardized brick module speed recovery after a simulated flood? The city ceases to be a frozen artifact and becomes a dynamic engine, its design choices revealing their functional logic over simulated time. This is the new paradigm, a shift from asking what was built to understanding how it lived, breathed, succeeded, and sometimes failed. It forces a humbling and exhilarating realization that the ancient planning systems we have painstakingly reconstructed were not just blueprints for stone, but algorithms for society itself. That digital simulation, alive with thousands of virtual citizens, reveals a profound truth. We have spent our journey meticulously examining the pieces, the celestial alignments, the sacred geometry, the standardized bricks, the social zoning, and the hidden water channels. But to truly reconstruct the ancient mind, we must now attempt the grand synthesis, viewing the city not as a collection of separate features, but as a single, breathing organism, a complex adaptive system. Picture an interactive digital model of an ancient metropolis, not as a static image, but as a dynamic dashboard. On your screen, you see sliders and dials labeled social hierarchy, water availability, cosmological belief, and technological level. You adjust the social hierarchy slider toward a more rigid, centralized power structure, and watch as the virtual model responds. The ceremonial avenues widen, the elite district near the temple expands, and the residential grids for workers become more uniform and regimented. You then turn the climate dial toward arid, simulating a prolonged drought. The model recalculates, and you witness the entire water network pulse with new priority, with canals and reservoirs expanding in the virtual landscape as smaller, outlying settlements begin to fade from the map. This is not science fiction, it is the cutting edge of understanding. A unified theory of ancient urban planning posits that these cities were not built from a single, unchanging blueprint, but emerged from a continuous, dynamic feedback loop. Environment, cosmology, technology, and social power were not separate ingredients. They were constantly interacting forces in a simmering crucible. A shift in one element would send ripples through the entire system, reshaping the urban form over generations. Think of it this way: a new ruler comes to power with a revolutionary cosmological belief, perhaps dedicating the city to a single sun god instead of a pantheon. This is not just a theological change, it is a planning directive. That new belief, a change in the cosmology parameter, immediately influences the geometry parameter. Temples must now be oriented exclusively to the solar path, not to various stars. This new orientation, the geometry, then dictates the measurement parameter, requiring adjustments in the sacred chords used by surveyors to lay out foundations. As these new, solar-aligned temples rise, they reshape the social parameter, creating new priestly classes and shifting the city's ritual centers, which in turn alters the flow of people and goods, the infrastructure parameter. The city evolves not through a master's command alone, but through this cascading conversation between ideas, stones, and people. systems theorist Manuel de Landa offers a powerful lens for this synthesis. He describes cities not as static things but as assemblages. An assemblage is a whole that emerges from the interaction of many different parts that can be physical, like stones and canals, or social, like laws and rituals. These parts come together, stabilize into a recognizable pattern, a city, but they always retain the potential to be rearranged. The city is a temporary crystallization of flows, of materials, energy, and information. This framework helps us reconstruct the holistic model. It explains why two cities founded on similar geometric principles, like the grid, can feel utterly different. One grid in a trading empire might crystallize around flows of commerce with wide streets for carts and large market squares. Another grid in a theocratic state might crystallize around flows of ritual power with processional avenues leading to a massive temple complex. The same geometric tool serves entirely different systemic goals. Reconstructing this dynamic model is the ultimate acknowledgement of ancient sophistication. It moves us beyond marveling at their astronomical knowledge or engineering skill in isolation. It forces us to appreciate their intuitive grasp of systems thinking, their capacity to weave a dozen competing variables into a durable, functioning order. They were not just building walls, they were encoding a resilient logic for living together, a logic that could adapt within limits to new rulers, new climates, and new ideas. The legacy of this systems thinking is written not just in the stones we excavate, but in the very DNA of how we conceive of urban life today. Every modern city planner grappling with traffic flow, green space, housing density, and community identity is, in essence, engaging in the same ancient practice, managing a complex adaptive system. They are simply working with a different set of materials and a much faster clock. Mohenjo-Daro rises from the Indus plain not as a ruin but as a question. Its discovery revealed a city of breathtaking order, a perfect laboratory to apply every principle of reconstruction we have explored. The process begins with the most obvious clue, the relentless grid. From the air, the street plan looks shockingly modern, a chessboard of wide main avenues intersecting at right angles to create large city blocks. This was not an organic tangle of paths, it was a declaration of intent. The first archaeologists to map it realized they were looking at a master plan executed with unwavering consistency across a vast urban area. But reconstructing the life within that grid requires moving from the map to the material, starting with the very stuff of its walls. Every brick tells a story of control. The builders of Mohenjo-Daro used baked bricks of a stunningly uniform size in a perfect ratio of 4:2:1. This standardization was not just about aesthetics, it was the engine of the grid. With a universal module, construction could be scaled and replicated by different work crews across the city, ensuring that every house, every well, every drain would fit together within the predetermined street lines. It speaks of a central authority or a deeply ingrained technical tradition, capable of enforcing a building code over hundreds of miles. This material clue is the first solid evidence of the planner's hand. Yet, the most revolutionary reconstruction came from looking down, not up. Beneath the orderly streets, archaeologists uncovered a hidden city, a labyrinth of baked clay drains and chutes that formed one of history's first integrated urban sanitation systems. Nearly every house had a bathroom connected to a street drain via a terra-cotta pipe. These drains were covered and designed with inspection points for maintenance. Reconstructing this network was a feat of hydraulic archaeology. By mapping the slope of the streets and the fall of the drains, researchers could model the entire system's flow, revealing a profound communal commitment to public health and organized waste management. This was not a luxury for the elite. It was a city-wide infrastructure, a powerful argument for a sophisticated, centralized administration that planned for the well-being of the entire population. The city's social blueprint is etched in its division of space. Mohenjo-Daro was clearly split into two distinct sectors, the raised citadel to the west and the sprawling lower town to the east. The citadel, built on a massive artificial platform, housed large, non-residential structures. The most famous is the so-called Great Bath, a watertight, brick-lined pool that likely served a ritual purification function. Nearby are large pillared halls and possible granaries. This area feels administrative and ceremonial, a zone of shared civic and perhaps spiritual life. The lower town, in contrast, was a dense grid of residential neighborhoods, workshops, and markets. Here, spatial analysis of artifacts begins to draw a map of social life. While the houses show variation in size and interior features, suggesting differences in wealth, they all had access to the same basic amenities like wells and drainage. This presents the central puzzle of Mohenjo-Daro. How do we reconcile its egalitarian infrastructure with evidence of social stratification? The answer may lie in what is conspicuously absent. Unlike contemporary cities in Egypt or Mesopotamia, Mohenjo-Daro has yielded no obvious towering temples, no grandiose palaces filled with royal insignia. There are no colossal statues of kings, no inscriptions glorifying a ruler's name. This lack forces a profound shift in interpretation. The centralized planning authority may not have been a single, deified monarch, but perhaps a council of elites, a priestly class, or a guild of merchant planners who derived their authority from managing trade and ritual rather than personal glorification. The city's grandeur is in its collective works, the bath, the granaries, the docks, not in a single ruler's tomb. The latest reconstructions use digital tools to test this social model. Agent-based simulations can populate the grid with virtual citizens, testing how goods might have flowed from the citadel's possible granaries to the lower town, or how processions to the Great Bath might have reinforced a shared civic identity. Geometric analysis confirms the city's orientation was carefully planned, though its celestial alignments are subtler than in other cultures, possibly tied to solar positions or the flow of the Indus River itself. The story of Mohenjo-Daro's end is itself a reconstruction from environmental clues. Sediment cores from the region indicate shifts in monsoon patterns and possible tectonic activity that altered the river's course. The mighty, life-giving Indus may have become unpredictable, flooding the city with destructive silt or abandoning it entirely. The meticulous drains fell silent, not from invasion or revolt, but from a changing relationship with the water they were built to manage. The city was slowly, peacefully, buried by its own environment, preserving its blueprint for millennia. Reconstructing Mohenjo-Daro is an ongoing conversation between the grid and the grain, between the grand civic plan and the small domestic artifact. It shows us that ancient urban genius could take a form that feels strangely familiar, even democratic, in its priorities. Its silent streets remind us that a city's most powerful legacy can be the care it took for its people's daily lives, a lesson etched not in monuments to power, but in the humble, perfect brick and the enduring logic of a clean, flowing street. The silent geometry of Teotihuacan is a question carved into a continent. In the high valley of Mexico, this immense city presents a paradox, a metropolis of staggering scale built by a people who left no deciphered written records. Its plan is its only language, a monumental argument in stone and alignment that we must learn to read. Our reconstruction begins with its most famous and misleading feature, the Street of the Dead. This grand central avenue does not run true north-south, as one might expect from a city obsessed with cosmic order. Instead, it is oriented precisely 15.5 degrees east of true north. This deliberate skew is our first and greatest clue, a fingerprint of the planner's celestial intent. For decades, the leading theory held that this alignment pointed to the setting point of the Pleiades star cluster on a key date in the Mesoamerican calendar. The Pleiades, known as the Seven Sisters, held profound significance across many cultures, often associated with the agricultural cycle and renewal. The alignment seemed poetic, a terrestrial avenue mirroring a celestial one. But a single, elegant theory is rarely the full story in archaeology. Competing evidence emerged, suggesting the avenue might instead be aligned with the imposing silhouette of Cerro Gordo, the sacred mountain to the north, which was seen as a source of water and fertility. Or perhaps it was a complex compromise designed to integrate both mountain and star. This is where modern technology enters the dialogue. Archaeoastronomer Ivan Sprajc and his colleagues employ a meticulous method to test these hypotheses. They use specialized panoramic photography from precise points along the Street of the Dead, capturing the entire horizon. Then, using advanced astronomical software, they rewind the sky to the city's zenith around 450 Common Era. They do not seek a vague correlation, but a precise moment where a star or the sun would have set directly behind a specific notch on the distant mountain profile, perfectly framed by the city's geometry. This digital verification moves us from speculation to a more confident reconstruction of the planner's observational genius. The celestial blueprint, however, extends far beyond one avenue. The entire city is a web of geometric relationships. The Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon are not randomly placed giants. Careful surveys reveal they are positioned according to a sacred triangle, their distances and angles creating a massive, invisible diagram on the landscape. The Ciudadela, a vast sunken plaza complex, forms another geometric anchor point. Some researchers propose that the layout encodes the Mesoamerican calendar, with distances between major structures representing cycles of time made permanent in space. This transforms the city from a collection of buildings into a three-dimensional cosmological model, a place where walking the streets was akin to moving through a map of time and the heavens. Yet for all its cosmic ambition, Teotihuacan was a living city for perhaps 200,000 people. The reconstruction of its social fabric comes from a more intimate source, the unique apartment compounds. These were not slums or haphazard huts, but orderly, walled residential complexes housing multiple families, often sharing a common courtyard. Each compound was a microcosm of the city's larger order, with standardized construction and a clear internal layout. Archaeologists find evidence that different compounds specialized in specific crafts, like obsidian working, pottery production, or shell ornament making. This reveals a sophisticated social and economic plan, a form of urban zoning where occupational groups lived and worked together, contributing to the city's economy from within their own neighborhoods. The compounds suggest a society with strong collective identity, where the grand cosmic order of the pyramids was mirrored in the disciplined, communal life of its citizens. Reconstructing Teotihuacan, therefore, requires holding two scales in mind simultaneously. We must see the breathtaking, mountain-sized alignments intended to harmonize human endeavor with the cosmos, and we must also see the intricate, human-scale world of the apartment compound, where daily life unfolded under that grand design. It represents the pinnacle of the planned Mesoamerican cosmopolis, a silent city whose very stones are a map of meaning, a testament to a vision that sought to build nothing less than a mirror of the universe itself on the plains of Mexico. The Grand Avenue of Teotihuacan points silently toward a mountain, a perfect alignment achieved without a single written manual we have ever found. This absence is the final, haunting mystery in our reconstruction. For every precise city plan we uncover, we must ask a profound question: where are the instruction books? The stones themselves are the output, the final product of a complex intellectual process. Our search now turns from the hardware of urban form to the lost software, the intangible knowledge systems, the manuals and oral traditions that guided generations of planners from master to apprentice. We possess rare, glorious fragments, For the Roman world, we have Vitruvius's De Architectura, a 10-volume treatise that details everything from the education of an architect to the principles of acoustics in theaters. In ancient India, the Shilpa Shastras provided exhaustive guidelines for sacred geometry, sculpture, and town planning, dictating the ideal proportions for a temple or the auspicious layout of a village. These texts are precious windows, but they are the exceptions. For most of the ancient world, this deep technical and cosmological knowledge was never written down in a single, accessible manual. It was transmitted through the living network of memory and practice, a sacred trust passed from teacher to student across a lifetime. This knowledge was the true operating system, and its loss is what makes our reconstruction so challenging and so philosophically deep. How then can we possibly reconstruct a library that was never built of papyrus or clay? We must become detectives of the intangible, looking for clues in unexpected places. The first clue is embedded in language itself, in the specialized technical vocabulary that survived in later texts or inscriptions. In Mesopotamia, the scribble schools were centers of immense learning. As historian of science Francesca Rochberg explains, these were not just places to learn cuneiform script. They were academies where mathematical tables for calculating brick volumes, astronomical observations for calendar keeping, and the standardized lists of measurements were meticulously copied and taught. The survival of these school tablets, with their multiplication tables and practice exercises, gives us the curriculum. We see the problems a young scribe planner would have solved, the precise calculations required to maintain the city's geometric and administrative order. This consistency of practice across centuries is another form of manual. When we see the same brick ratio used in Harappan cities separated by 500 miles and 200 years, we are reading a silent commandment. That unwavering standard is itself a text, written not in words but in material habit, proof of a teaching so effective it became instinct. The survival of traditional building crafts in some communities offers a living echo of this lost knowledge. In parts of India, master masons known as Esthapati still use ancient principles from the Shilpa Shastras, employing knotted cords and geometric diagrams to lay out temples without modern instruments. Observing their process is like watching a fragment of the ancient manual come to life. Their knowledge is not held in a book, but in their hands, their eyes, and the rhythmic chants that sometimes accompany the laying of a cornerstone. This search for the lost library forces a fundamental shift in our goal. We realize that reconstructing an ancient city is not merely an exercise in mapping and modeling. It is an attempt at philosophical recovery. We are trying to recover a way of thinking, a holistic worldview that saw no separation between the mathematical and the mystical, the practical and the poetic. The planner was not just an engineer, but a mediator between community and cosmos. Their manual was a blend of star charts, morality tales, construction techniques, and hydrological principles, all understood as parts of a single sacred truth. To rebuild their city, we must, in some small way, learn to think like them, to see the world not as a collection of resources to be managed, but as a meaningful pattern to be respectfully joined. This journey through celestial alignments and social blueprints ultimately brings us here, to the silent space where knowledge was once whispered, not printed, where the most important plans were kept in the collective memory of a culture. Recovering that is the most delicate and most human part of the reconstruction. That silent library of memory and practice holds our final lesson. Our journey to reconstruct the ancient planning systems has revealed something far greater than forgotten engineering. It has uncovered one of humanity's most profound intellectual and spiritual achievements. We have traced the lines from celestial alignments etched in stone to the hidden geometry of sewer networks, from the sacred ratios governing a temple's rise to the social blueprints fossilized in a city's streets. These were not the primitive sketches of a fledgling civilization, but the sophisticated, dynamic operating systems of cultures that saw the city as a living whole. They mastered a delicate, brilliant balance, weaving cosmic order into the very fabric of earthly necessity. The streets were aligned to the stars not out of superstition, but from a deep conviction that human flourishing depended on harmony with the larger universe. The standardized brick and the geometric grid were tools for imposing a durable, shared meaning onto the perceived chaos of the natural world. The ultimate takeaway is this: ancient cities were conscious creations. They were not accidents of geography or mere aggregations of people. They were intentional models designed to make the universe comprehensible and society functional. Every right angle, every oriented avenue, every public well was a statement about how a community believed the world worked and how people should live within it. This legacy is not a relic to be admired from a distance. As we confront our own urgent urban challenges, the sprawl that isolates, the inequality that divides, the climate pressures that threaten our foundations, these ancient systems speak to us. They do not offer a literal blueprint to copy, a stone pyramid for a glass skyscraper. They offer something far more valuable, a lesson in holistic thinking and long-term vision. They remind us that a city is more than infrastructure. It is an ecosystem of meaning. It is a story we choose to tell, in steel and concrete and green space, about who we are, what we value, and what kind of future we are building. The ancient planners asked, how do we build a home that reflects the cosmos and cares for the community? It is a question that has never lost its power. If this dive into the lost blueprints of history has reshaped how you see the world beneath your feet, consider subscribing for more journeys into the mysteries of our shared past. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Which ancient city's planning system, from Mohenjo-Daro's hydraulic genius to Teotihuacan's silent cosmology, intrigues you the most? The conversation, like the reconstruction,